My memory might be a little spotty, and then I'll do my best.
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where three old friends take a second listen to classic bands' influential albums track by track. I'm Dan Fiden. We normally take this journey together, but this is a special episode. This is a backtracking interview.
For our third season, we selected 15 of our favorite albums that we think deserve because of old-fashioned backtracking. Backtracking is the greatest podcast. Raph and JW and Ken make this podcast every week. Backtracking is the greatest podcast. Get ready for podcast action.
Today is a very special day on Backtracking because we're joined by a guest, and it's not just any old guest. We are joined by someone who is, number one, a prolific film composer. He's responsible for the iconic scores of movies like Boys Don't Cry and High Art. He's also, if you can believe it, a novelist. He is the author of the gritty mystery noir series, the Dewey Decimal Trilogy. And in the 90s, he helped redefine the limits of post-hardcore, art rock, math rock, I don't know what you want to call it, but the band was Shudder to Think, and we all know and love them. Later, he made records like A Camp. But whether he is doing a movie like Margin Call, touring the world, he always comes to the world and his work with a really unmistakable curiosity and willingness to just follow his inspiration wherever it may take him. So today, we're going to talk about one of my 5 critical albums, my 5 favorite overlooked albums, Mind Science of the Mind. This is the singer of Mind Science of the Mind, the songwriter, the guitarist, the bassist, the overall inspirato of Mind Science of the Mind. It is Nathan Larson. Nathan, welcome to Backtracking. I appreciate you taking the time, but I don't want to take too much of your time, so we're going to dive directly into it. So the beginning, young Nathan Larson, you grew up in the DC area?
I grew up in DC, and it was a really rad music scene, to put it mildly. And from the time I was 14 or so, I was going to shows with my mom. My mom would take me to shows, and I would go on my own with my friends. And I was going to school when I was that age. I was sort of in suburban Maryland, outside of, was like Bethesda, and I knew some kids who were sort of into punk and stuff. But when I was like 14, I started going to punk shows, and I hadn't really connected yet with the local scene, but it was sort of going to see the Bad Brains, who were like, that was one of the bands that I remember going with my mom, and she was so excited because she thought it was really exotic. And I had gotten in trouble sneaking out, and then she, being a cool mom, she was curious what I was doing, and so she sort of got into it as well. But and then eventually I got to know the guys who would become Swiz. Some of those guys, a lot of the skater. I wasn't really a skater. I was more like I would hang out and want to look like I was skating, and I had a board, but it was not that. I just wasn't very good at it. So
Yeah.
I had some friends who were real, like thrasher folks, and it just started to go. It took it started to expand from there. We formed this band Swiz that was like, wanted to do hardcore when it was slightly less trendy. That was more like when I was like 16, 17. And the older guys were already playing like, clean guitars and sort of doing more sort of arty, wire, kind of Gang of Four sort of inspired stuff, which was really rad, but it didn't feel we didn't feel like we had fully engaged and expressed ourselves within the sort of the older style. So
Yeah.
we were interested in sort of doing that and also combining it with like a lot of thrash stuff, like we were listening to those early Metallica records and, Metal Church and sort of like Megadeth, and we wanted
Yeah.
to sort of get some of that energy in there too, which was really not fashionable, and we were a lot younger. I mean, now I'm still homies with the Discord people who are wonderful, and Ian is obviously like my, you know, sort of godfather, like he is to many people. Um, so that was, and parallel to this, there was sort of my friend Craig Wedren had moved from Ohio who, the Shudder to Think singer.
Yeah.
He had moved in, I think he moved in ninth grade, and we were together in high school. And he pretty quickly uh, got with the guys who to form Shudder to Think in like '86, I feel like. So that was around the time that Swiz was coming together. So we were hanging out at school all the time. Um, so it was it was just a really natural, very fun scene, and a lot of older guys. And I think, I was intimidated by those older folks, and but then I felt like we sort of carved our own path. And then eventually I wound up in New York, and Craig asked me to join Shudder to Think, and I was excited because I love that band. But I had
So,
quit Swiz, so yeah.
all right. So from a timeline perspective, you were playing bass in Swiz, yeah?
Right.
And then,
Yeah.
but you kind of moved when you joined Shudder to Think, which was
Yeah.
right before the recording of Pony Express
Yeah,
record, or
it was like
after?
90, late 91, I think, or 90, early 92. And so in the interim, I had moved to New York and started playing guitar after quitting Swiz in like 89.
Yeah.
And so I was living in New York, and Craig was at NYU. I had a lot of friends who were in college, but I was just working like weird jobs and trying to find an apartment and eventually living in the East Village. Yeah, and I switched over to guitar, which always had kind of been my intention.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. I was talking to one of the guys that I do the podcast with just yesterday about you and your guitar playing,
Mm.
and when you first joined Shudder to Think, if you kind of listen to Get Your Goat and then
Yeah.
listen to Pony Express record,
Yeah.
one of the things that was I think the first time that we saw you was must have been in '96 in Chicago, probably on the maybe Pony Express record tour.
Right.
Um, but there was a little bit of real kind of guitar pyrotechnics in a way
Right.
that was not necessarily super common in indie bands at that
Yeah.
point. Certainly the
Right.
bands that we were kind of seeing in Chicago. And
Yeah.
then when we learned that you had kind of moved from bass onto guitar, just frankly we were pretty
Yeah.
surprised. Um, had you always been playing guitar, and was that kind of like
Yeah.
Megadeth influence what gave you the little bit of kind of
Yeah.
swag, or what was it?
Yeah. And then, I loved like rock radio, American rock radio, and just it was like it was like Van Halen. I
Yeah.
mean, that was always part of my in my body. And so it seemed really natural to play like that. We listened to Thin Lizzy, and then we listened to Def Leppard. I love Def Leppard. But it was really not cool to express. Of course, it wasn't in the '90s. It was a little too close, and the irony was you were supposed to, but I genuinely loved it. So I was just trying to do a version of that somehow, in the context of like a weird, alt rock band.
Yeah. And so when you were in New York, was there a little bit more of a kind of a glam rock revival happening in the community there? I know like Space Hog was floating around kind of
Right.
during that time, and they always
Space
struck
Hog
me
was,
as pretty glammy, but
I mean, with the sort of people that I was exposed to were actually it was quite the opposite. It was sort of like the Knitting Factory scene, which was like a, jazz punk mashup, John Zorn,
yeah.
and then all those sort of amazing New York. I saw somehow when I was like 16, I saw the Swans play in New York
Yeah.
at the old Pyramid Club, and that was like really powerful. And so it was more bands coming from that perspective, and then just getting my mind blown by what was available at places like the Kitchen, where it was like Diamanda Galas doing this crazy. I don't know if you've heard of her, but like
Yep.
that's doing that crazy, thing she did, and all these amazing, more sort of noise rock Cop Shoot Cop were starting to do
Yep.
stuff. There was all that kind of thing. So it was really more in that sphere and less the sort of like hair metal, or there wasn't really much of that because New York was very, so it was even more sort of transgressive to try to, I felt like, to sort of combine some of those riffs, which I've never felt like we did very explicitly. We are now, and when we're writing new stuff, we're being a little more explicit with like Def Leppard sounding
Yeah.
riffs and stuff, which feels really fun. But at the time, I didn't have a lot of exposure to that sort of thing because that was deeply uncool,
Yeah.
And my friends, yeah,
And you didn't have like the, in Chicago around that time, there were kind of these like math rock bands that were,
yeah.
floating around, but, or you didn't have like an interest in like prog music when you were younger, like
I mean,
kind of
I loved
Genesis, Rush,
I
yes, that
loved,
stuff.
well, I loved Rush, but that was more because they managed to be proggy, but also really poppy and
Yeah.
had like these real hooks, that made it like, I don't know, when I first was listening to Rush, I remember my friend got Permanent Waves when it came out, and I just was like, what? I thought it was the best stuff I'd ever heard. And
Yeah.
then I don't think, of course, I wasn't really playing I wasn't really a musician yet, but I don't remember uh, actually consciously understanding that they were doing complex things. It just sort of sounded cool and
Yeah.
you know interesting and also very poppy. And the pop part was more the emphasis, I thought.
Yeah.
Contrast it to like the Swans or something where it's like it was all just sort of like this weird muscle that was totally pretty atonal,
Yeah.
and that was also equally cool. So somewhere in between,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was the sweet spot.
Yeah. So, all right. So Pony Express record,
Yeah,
you guys do that. It's on Epic.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and I remember at the time a lot of exposure, tons of kind of
yeah,
press around that record. Um, and then my recollection is that Craig was ill for a while,
yeah,
and so there was a
yeah,
space between that and 50,000 AD of a few years where
yeah.
the Mind Science record happened.
That's right. That's exactly right. There was a Craig got Hodgkin's lymphomic
Yeah.
cancer, and you know happily my dad is a cancer doctor in New York, and so
Oh my God.
I was really close with, we would go to chemo together and stuff, and that um so we really went through that as friends. Um, but yes, there was a little bit of a space uh, in time, and I had been writing some of that stuff that later went on to be the Mind Science thing. During Pony Express record, I was sort of walking around the studio, and I basically we recorded it in Baltimore at this place that was awesome, but it was definitely there was nothing to in the neighborhood. Like you couldn't if you walked out, it was super sketchy. And I was in a transitional spot where I had broken up with my girlfriend, and I just moved from New York. I mean, I didn't move all my shit, but I just sort of moved into the studio in Baltimore. So for me, it really felt like a continuous, there was a bunch of touring in the middle there, but I felt like we did Pony Express record and they just toured it nonstop. And then I went back to that same studio with Ted Nicely,
Yeah.
and I just had during Pony Express record, I just had my guitar lying around and was had all these extra sort of riffs that felt like um, they were really they were cool, and they were a little too cute or something for Shudder. They were a little too like uh, I don't know.
Pop.
They just, they were a little, they were a little too pop, I think, for Shudder to Think. Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah.
jump in. I obviously
Yeah.
want to,
Yeah.
but I mean, again, going back, I feel like there is this pop sensibility,
Yeah.
catchiness in the songs, real
Yeah.
sing-alongable songs that I
Right.
actually feel like are a little more present on 50,000 AD for Shudder to Think than they were on
Yeah.
Pony Express record, which was
Yeah.
much more kind of angular.
Right. Exactly. So I think that
Okay,
was
that's
also
really
something,
interesting.
no, and that was something that I was interested in exploring with that. Um, Precisely because, I mean, we loved Shudder to Think loved pop stuff, and there wasn't any, there was sort of not, there wasn't any sort of disconnect. I just wanted to keep making records and stay in the space of being an artist who's just in the studio making records, and that was sort of my desire. So it wasn't because we were struggling or any of that. It was just
Yeah,
because it I had a lot of extra energy and I had extra time.
yeah.
So it was really and it was something that I just dearly wanted to do with my friends who I worked with Joan Wasser and Mary Timony and um, Kevin March, because since since the late 80s, Joan and Mary and I have been super, super tight. And they lived in Boston for a period, and I would go and visit them, and we would jam. And, that was the genesis of a lot of the songs kind of came out of us, me coming with the riff and then us playing around with it there in Boston. So
Okay.
over
Okay,
the
yeah.
years. Yeah.
That was my next question, kind of how did this group of people come together? But it was really
Yeah.
organic. These were friends that you've been
It
playing with
was
for a
it was
while at this
super
point.
organic. The drummer Kevin March later went on to play in Shudder to Think after Adam Wade quit. But and so he was playing in a band called the Dam Builders with Joan, and Mary and Joan were roommates. So it was all a pretty tight like package. And um, these were people that I'd been wanting to like make stuff with for a long time, you know.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
later on, when we went to do shows, Jeff Buckley was around, and he was my homie, and he had just met Joan, I think a year or so prior. So they were going out, and it made sense for him. He wanted to be involved somehow, and it made sense for him to do these like 3 or 4 shows. We did very, very brief run of shows on the East Coast.
Yeah, I remember when those shows happened and I was
Yeah.
in college or maybe working in Chicago and unable to
Oh,
get
okay.
out
Yeah.
there. But
Yeah.
I had seen Jeff Buckley opening for
Oh.
Juliana Hatfield in
Oh, yeah.
Toronto.
Yeah. Yeah.
And was a really big fan. But one
Yeah.
thing, and so I knew that he played with you guys for a little while, but it
Yeah.
always struck me that, obviously his sad story, but like you wonder where his songwriting and kind of aesthetic taste was headed. And
Right.
it always felt to me like Sketches had this strong Shudder to Thinky, Mind
Yeah.
Science, kind of a
I'm
proggy vibe almost,
Yeah.
in some of the
No, I mean
songs.
we all met in 93, when we were doing Pony Express record, and he was around, and we were cross sort of pollinating tons of stuff. There was, I mean, we had the same Andy Wallace, who mixed Pony Express record, was at the time was also just finishing Grace up with Jeff, so we were always in communication. Andy was back and forth between Bearsville, in Woodstock, and Manhattan, where we were mixing. So we were hanging out and exchanging ideas, and Jeff loved like weird like rock music, and sort of was never found a place. I mean, he never found in his own stuff under his name, didn't exactly figure out how to express that. But I think I mean, obviously he wrote amazing, amazing songs, and he's a legend, but had this real like profound taste for sort of uh weird rock music.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So on Mind Science, I I want to ask a little bit about the lyric writing. So
Sure.
it seems as though lyrically there's an approach that is not dissimilar to the Shudder to Think approach, which
Yeah.
is pretty almost a kind of an exquisite corpse kind of
Yeah,
approach to
exactly.
doing stuff.
Exactly.
Is that really, so that's
Yeah,
pretty
I
much
mean,
it?
we not literally but very like word games and and then I can get sort of annoyed by it now in retrospect because it's
Oh,
sort of
really?
like it's like okay, well it's like all right, that's a cool sounding thing to say after that or whatever, and but but and I wish that I'd spent more time on the lyrics and I wish that I'd sung it more than once through, because that was also a thing where I was just we had this thing where we were trying to do it super fast and I didn't dedicate enough. I was also really nervous about it too, obviously. And these are people that I really love and respect and didn't
You were nervous because it was your first time singing, or
it was
because
my
these
first
were your
time
songs?
singing in the studio in any context really more than just a couple of songs.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal for me and I was also like, young and cocky and kind of like didn't want it to seem like a big deal. So I was like, I'm just going to do it once and then that's fucking fine or whatever. And then I would listen afterwards and be like, oh, come on. And then but then it was too late.
Yeah.
So I sort of painted myself into a corner a little bit with that stuff. And the lyrics, yeah. So I mean, it's one of the things that a technique that Craig and I would do all the time was sort of like you get the song, you don't have any lyrics, and then you sort of get on the mic and you're like, a buckle song blasted, blah, blah, blah. I know 5 years or whatever, and then you sit with the piece of paper. What did it sound like?
Yeah.
A microphone busted, whatever, whatever, So it, and then that's really fun. I think when you're younger and when you're getting into like because Craig and my relationship was really based on a lot of literature and like writing stuff and we were really like nerdy
Yeah.
writers and we would have notebooks around and just be doing the most like I'm trying to fight I have an urge to call it indulgent or whatever because it
Yeah.
but it and then in the late 80s early 90s there was all this at least we were that age but it seemed like it was kind of a golden age of like really interesting nonfiction stuff like Feral House and all these really rad, publishers putting out the stuff that was really so fun and discovering when you're younger, you discover all these writers,
Yeah.
um, Burroughs and in our case it was like a lot of these British guys like Will Self and Martin Amis and then
Yeah.
more abstract stuff. And so we were really trying to be fancy literary in that way.
Yeah.
And so I guess that what's the I guess as time went on, I tried to learn how to write stuff that had in its like DNA. Some of the songs on the Mind Science record really were heartfelt, coming from something in my life, and then I sort of put all this word salad around that. But the real skill now, it's interesting to be writing new Shudder to Think stuff now because we're about to make a new record,
Oh,
and
awesome.
it's trying to challenge ourselves to sometimes be direct and say what we mean and then play with it as opposed to um just doing nonsense sort of syllables for the sake of which is still fun but I think there's something uh and then you can assign meaning to things later and stuff but I think there's something tiny bit hollow about it as a practice to just do nonsense lyrics, which isn't, I'm not saying that's exactly what I was doing on my times, but there
Yeah.
was a big component of that.
Well, again, as a listener, for me, kind of coming to it from, the Pony Express
Yeah,
record, which came out kind of right before, it really
yeah,
felt like it had some of the similar elements, but
yeah,
overall, it felt a little bit more emotionally accessible. And there are
that's good.
songs
Yeah,
on there that, like, Oceans Don't Need Us. Like, these
yeah,
are
that's,
like
yeah,
full on kind of very pretty pop songs,
yeah, yeah,
which
it was
was
really, yeah,
surprising,
yeah,
um, and anyway, but I had a question about this because
sure,
and I may be totally off base, but when I look at the first Love Last Rites record
yeah,
that you guys did,
Yeah.
Really, it's all quite like it kind of feels like you gave yourself permission to write
Yeah.
pop music on that.
Yeah.
And
Right. And
and it's
yeah.
like just wonderfully executed,
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
like pop music coming out of
Yeah.
like this collaboration that I had
Right.
associated with like kind of much more,
Yeah.
esoteric stuff. Like where were your heads? Was there this sense that
Right.
because we're doing a soundtrack, we can kind of give ourselves an excuse
E-
to put that shirt on?
exactly. Exactly. And so it's all sort of these mind games we were playing with ourselves about what pop music meant, because we all loved pop music of all, eras and forms. Um, and Craig is still, he's amazing because he keeps up on, I'm less inclined to know what the new Geese song or the new Charlie XCX single is, but he's going to know like he knows, he's
Yeah.
staying totally current with pop music, which I think is amazing. Um, so I think that because there was a degree of abstraction or of denial, like we could be like, it's not for us, it's for a context that where it
Yeah.
calls for something like this, which is basically also the careers that we both, Craig and I, went into doing film stuff, film music. It's all about that, creating like, oh, there's a Dolly Parton thing and they can't get the song, so you gotta, or there's a Rolling Stones, so you have to sort of do. So that was the first time we were able to explore that side of our aspect of our skill set, which was really, really rad. And yeah, then I had been listening in the early, starting sort of in the early 90s, well, really all my life, but like, soul music and classic, 60s and 70s soul stuff just meant so much to me. And, I had Stevie Wonder records growing up and stuff. And that's really, and Otis Redding. And, it's like that's to me, those are like, that's true, like songcraft.
Yeah.
So to sort of explore that a little bit too, which is kind of what I was doing with the track, I Want Someone Badly that Jeff sang on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly that song, I bet it really is it's a very interesting record kind of from beginning to end because you kind of walk through a bunch of different genres, but they
Yeah,
all
thank
do
you.
have that very kind of like just kind of old school pop songwriting
Yeah,
craftsmanship,
yeah,
which was really nice. And it feels
yeah,
like that in some ways. I mean, again, my perception broke a seal for you as you
yeah,
moved more into doing film work, and then
yeah,
you made the Jealous God record and stuff like that.
right.
It really feels like that was a place that you got really comfortable after that.
Yeah, I did. I got really comfortable for a minute and then I got really uncomfortable
Oh, really?
with, I sort of made it, well, then I was like, okay, well, I'll go for full, I'll see what it's like to try to be a front person and do and then I got this opportunity to make this solo record, Jealous God, which was like such an incredible opportunity. And everything about it was rad. Working with this producer, Clive Langer, who is like a legendary, British, he did all those Madness records and arranged that stuff and worked with Bowie and Morrissey and, you know, um, so it was so incredible, and then I had, uh, so, but then when it came time to selling it to people and doing shows, I just didn't have in my body at that point the ability to like, or the uh the courage to sort of get rid of some of my old habits.
Yeah.
And it sort of coincided with, so I wasn't able to really execute on doing shows for that record. And then that kind of killed its ability to do anything and led me to quit drinking eventually, which was more like 2000 or so, which was when I became sober. I'm sort of California, so I love weed and stuff. So I'm not like
Yeah.
sober, but drinking sober, which had been an issue um, for me,
Yeah.
for all that, especially the alcohol, um,
Yeah.
just really was a big issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was glad to put that behind me,
So
you know.
I before we go on, I want to be
Yeah.
sensitive to your time. It's 3, I think.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you have a few more minutes? Just a couple more
Yeah, of course,
questions?
totally. Let me
Just feel
just
free to.
answer this one thing here.
Yeah, of
I just
course.
want to say, uh, let me just, okay, great. Yeah, totally.
Okay. So on the Mind Science record, have you gotten together with those folks kind of since that record? Have you ever played any of these songs again live, or even just kind of like
No,
yourselves for
no,
fun?
no. I mean, and we are really like Joan and I are like super tight.
Yeah.
We hang in a few, like a month. We're gonna do like a Thin Lizzy tribute with a big group of people in New
Oh, cool.
York. So we still do shit like that. And she's always out doing something. She was doing this like, but this really, but to look at those songs, no, because it just seems like we still haven't done the thing that we could, another type of thing that we could do together. So we're always trying to come up with new stuff, you know.
But you don't
But
think
in
that
the
the new stuff would ever be Mind Science stuff?
I
Would
don't
be
know.
called
Maybe
Mind
it
Science?
could be. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it could be. But Joan is so busy and such an incredible musician. She just like embodies music in a way that I just admire her so much. And Mary is awesome, but Mary lives in DC, so we don't see her as often, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and Kevin March is amazing. He lives in New Jersey. He's still just a fantastic drummer. But Joan is I see her quite frequently, and
Yeah.
playing music with her is something that I just love, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eh,
Um, do you look back? I mean, and if the answer is I don't look back, but if you do you look back at that record and think about any of the tracks and feel like God, like we that is exactly what we were going for at that time on that record. Like that one nailed it.
Yeah.
What all right,
Yeah.
so tell
I
me.
mean, I think that instrumentally it was like as fucking good as it could have possibly been, considering how, you know, we did it. I played the bass on the record too, but there's like two guitars, violin, and drums we did live for all the songs, and sort of did it in the same room, which was something that we'd slightly moved. I mean, Shudder to Think did something similar, but then we did a lot of overdubs and would replace stuff. And in this case, it's still pretty much you kind of get what we sounded like standing in a room, and it was really good. And there was a song. Well, you know, I thought it was a missed opportunity that the girls didn't sing more, but for them that was like a drag to sing, and they really didn't want to sing. So it was sort of like a song like "Do You Rule."
Yeah.
I think that that was so good, and I felt like that to me also as like an old Aerosmith fan,
Yeah.
you know, that I know them they're you know they're not cool or whatever, and like Steven Tyler's a horrible racist and stuff like that, but nonetheless like that kind of groove. I thought the outro to like "Do You Rule" was like as good a rock riff as I had available to me at that time.
Yeah.
And so I'm really proud of the instrumentally. Vocally, I wish I'd taken more time, and there were sequences where like whole stretches of songs where I'm like, oh, I could have just like either tried to not do that falsetto or just like tried to do it again and do it. So it was, I feel there's some
Yeah.
missed opportunities there. So that's a little bit of a wound for me when I think about this record, that I didn't give the vocals more time.
Oh yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, for what it's worth, for
yeah,
somebody who's been
yeah.
listening to the record for a long time, the
Thank you.
vocals were
That's
like
great. Yeah,
maybe the big surprise for me, right?
yeah,
Because I had never heard you sing,
right.
and then I was
No,
like,
no, I
shit, this
hadn't
guy
sung.
can actually
Right.
sing.
Thank
Like,
you. Yeah,
um,
yeah,
but the other thing that is interesting is hearing you say that you recorded a lot of this stuff live, or the bulk
yeah,
of it live.
yeah.
There are a few places in this record where it seems like you guys were kind of jointly really into polyrhythms and doing kind of
Yes,
3/4 on a,
totally.
and there's I can't remember what song it is right now, but there's one where you
Yeah,
have 3/4 and then another three over the top of that. Like the
right.
violin is doing
Oh
like a
yeah.
triplet, and then the
That
guitar is kind of chunking a
right.
different triplet over the four.
I think
It's
that might
really
be
neat.
Yeah, there's an instrumental that we had that was, yeah, the Dutch Ghost Reclamation of the City of New York. I think that might be what you're talking about. Maybe not. It's a little jazzy. And that was totally right out of having been hanging out at the Knitting Factory.
Yeah.
And we were all homies with like the Lounge Lizards people and these sort of guys who came out of no wave and kind of noise rock and started playing sort of jazz with that at its root. So
Yeah.
that was really fun to be able to explore that in a way that was way different than the way Shudder to Think would have presented it,
Yeah.
because it had a swing to it that was different.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that, yeah, that's, thank you for noticing that. That was just so fun for us, you know. We really
Yeah.
got off on that. Yeah.
It captures the kind of, you know, a few kind of semi unusual time signature stuff and weird changes, some interesting rhythmic things that you
Yeah.
guys would do in Shudder to Think, but it maintains this pocket and groove throughout the
Yeah.
record that I think
Yeah.
is pretty one of the things that
Yes.
makes it really stand out for me.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Yeah, no, it was just so much fun. And Kevin March is an amazing drummer. He he's just, you know, he went on to be Guided by Voices like
Yeah.
drummer forever and played with a lot of different, and he just is an incredible, um very well trained drummer, you know.
Yeah.
Not really a punk rock guy, but more of like a went to Berkeley type of dude where he
Yeah.
just really learned his shit, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Um
So, do you want to There's so much that we could talk about, kind of following Shudder to Think, kind
yeah.
of V1 or V2, I guess, like after 50,000 AD. We talked a
Yeah.
little bit about Jealous God, but I mean, you've had a million projects since. You had a camp. You've
Yeah.
written novels, which is like
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
seems as though you're kind of just based on the output pretty
Yeah.
happy to kind of follow wherever your nose leads you. Do you feel like there's continuity between these things, or are you just kind of like,
I
now I
don't
feel like I'm
know.
doing books?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, the books were, I was always, like I said about my relationship with Craig, it was really based on like being like fucking like pretentious like teenagers and like carrying around like a Genet book or whatever and being like, oh, have you checked this out? You know, it was really, that
Yeah.
was the nut of our relationship. And a lot of my big relationships in my life have been based on sort of shared and film and literature, you know, references and being nerdy about that. So the literary part was always, I felt like, in my blood, and I've been writing for a long time. So that felt like a continuous thing. Um, I mean, I think that, you know, also the weird stuff, the weird thing about, I don't know how you feel about your life, but it's always like you, I feel like, I mean, you know, fundamentally, I can see that I've done a lot of work. And then fundamentally, I also feel like I'm fucking everything up at all times. You know what I mean? As I go, I'm just continually fucking up in all these different areas, which I guess, you know, is the nature of being a person. And you sort of have this sense of yourself. Either you have, I would love to have a more you know, outsized sense of my ego and think that, you know, but it's basically, uh, uh, I'm really proud of the Mind Science record. I think it's fantastic. And, but I'm also really into moving. Well, here's so in doing Shudder to Think again now, which has just been such a joy and so amazing. And the shows have been so incredible. And the chance now to record new music with that band is so exciting. And when we just have like loads of ideas and they're just coming, you know, they're like, it's like a flood of ideas, and it doesn't feel stale, and that's so exciting and a surprise. So, you know, maybe there will come a time where I experience this again with Mary and Joan and Kevin, and we can have a similar experience where, because it's wonderful to be able to, as you know, at 55, be able to go back to something that you did 32 years ago and then kind of treat yourself a little kinder and be
Yeah.
a little more gentle. And then also, you know, I have to say, I'm a meditation teacher, and then Craig is a big meditator, and all my friends who are like Joan is sober and she's the meditator, you know, so we're all doing yoga and stuff. So we're very, um, we've done a lot of work. And so when we come together now, however much sort of damage did to ourselves or to each other. We can have a relationship in the present and sort of examine the past a little bit, but not like dwell on it and not try to. But I think that's also what gave the Shudder to Think shows a lot of power recently, is that we are doing it with what our bodies now instead of trying to recreate something that we did when we were 25.
Yeah.
So, and our bodies now are in good shape. So we get to be able to feel like we still can channel music in this way. So I would hope, and I imagine it's coming, but I would hope for a similar experience with the mind science thing, you know?
Yeah.
I
And
think
so
that's, yeah.
when is I mean, do you know when the new Shudder to Think stuff is going to come out? I know
We're
a friend of
gonna,
mine saw you guys in LA
oh, okay.
couple months ago, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, at the
Um,
Lodge Room. That was so fun.
yeah. But so this is going to keep going.
Yeah, so we did a single on Discord, and now we're doing a full record for whatever reason, and we're recording it in LA at Craig's in his like home studio, which is fucking awesome. And it's in, it's LA, so it's like everybody has, you know how that is there. I mean, I'm sure Hawaii is even, nicer that way, but it's like you have the big property, and then there's like a
Yeah.
pool house, and he has a studio there, and there's like a pool and shit. So it's great,
Yeah.
and it's very comfortable, and we're doing it ourselves. So I'll be there for a couple weeks now. We have the bones of like 15 songs or something at least. So we're trying to figure out what they all mean. And then we keep writing stuff, so it's confusing. It's hard to sort of
Yeah.
track it. And then we're trying to figure out how to do it from afar, but the real thing is really happening when we're together. So we're trying to get something out by this time next year, I would say,
That's great.
in a year. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And last question, since
Yeah.
what we're going to be covering are albums that you love that maybe not everybody loves, or you feel like people have gotten wrong over the years, or they're just
Yeah.
not that popular.
Yeah.
Any of them come to mind for you that we can tell people to check out?
Oh man. Can I mail you back about
Sure.
that? Let me think
Yeah.
for a sec though, because I was just looking at, I mean,
So I'll tell you my list.
yeah, yeah,
My,
yeah. Let me
so
hear.
we each pick five. My
Yeah.
list is the Mind Science record, Idaho's
Wow.
record, Three Sheets to the Wind,
Okay.
the
Cool.
Sting record, The Soul Cages. Okay.
Yeah, no, actually, I'm with you on that one. It's really good.
I mean, you
Yeah.
have to get past like the stinginess of the
Yeah.
whole thing, but
Yeah.
man, it is a fucking great record.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the Candlemass record, Tales of Creation.
Candlemass are fucking awesome.
Unbelievable, right?
My son and I were just talking. Well, he's moving more into different, but he was definitely I went through a big metal phase, and we talked a lot about Candlemass. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I like kind of went back to Candlemass after all this time, I was
Yeah.
like, I had gotten really into like Low and Idaho and like all this kind of
Yeah.
slowcore music.
Right.
And I realized like, man, I think Tales of Creation actually is like when I was in 8th grade, that's kind of
Yeah.
what put that slow
It's the same feeling. Yeah.
you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
it was
totally.
weird to kind of discover that after all this time. That
Right.
there's some continuity there. Anyway, the last one is a relatively new record called Angel in Real Time by Gang of Youths.
Okay.
Um,
Angel and Real. I'm gonna write that down.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
probably I definitely am not like Craig. I mean, I kind of
Right.
have to really make an effort now to discover
Oh yeah, me too.
new
Yeah.
music.
Oh yeah. There's so much old music to rediscover, so that's the
I
thing.
know, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, just based on what you just said, let me see. Well, it's not that obscure, but I would say Die Kreuzen. Die
Okay.
Kreuzen, I just contributed to this book that they did, which was so needed. But October File, that Die Kreuzen record, I think it's October File. It's the one with Man in the
Okay.
Trees. And I mean,
Okay.
that fucking record and it was so important for me to bridge it. If you listen to it in the context of like this band was playing with early Shudder to Think
Yeah.
in DC, I would go see them in DC, and I was like, this is the best band this is the best band in America. They were
Yeah.
so good live. So
Yeah.
Die Kreuzen, I would say Oktoberfile, like that's a fucking great record. it's a whole atmosphere, and you're just like in this like, whoa, Man in the Trees, just fucking. It's been so long, Do you
Yeah.
know that stuff?
I
I
don't,
mean,
but I'm
it's
gonna check it out now.
extraordinary. It's really, really good, and it's a very special band. So that's one of them. If I think of another
Awesome.
one, though, I'll email you.
Yeah, shoot me an email. We'll put him in the show notes so people can
That's great.
go track him down.
Yeah,
All right, man. Well,
great.
listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this record.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's an honor, and I really appreciate it.
Wow. All I can say at my own interview is wow. Thank you, Nathan Larson. That was an incredibly informative, fun, interesting chat for me, and I think I speak for every backtracking fan when I say they enjoyed it even more than I did. That's why they're going to go out. They're going to hit the like button because that's what the thing does that makes the algorithm do the thing that the algorithm does. You're also going to hit the comment. You're going to say amazing job. I love it. I can't wait to get the new Shudder to Think record. I can't wait to go back and get the Mind Science the Mind record. You're going to hit the subscribe. You're going to hit an email to us. Backtracking Rocks, ROX at Gmail. You can follow us on Instagram, Backtracking Rocks, ROX. You can follow us on Twitter at Backtracking Rocks, ROX. You can go on to Reddit and look for the username Backtracking Rocks. But the most important thing that you have to do is you got to come back next week because we're going to do it all over again. We are going to cover Roth's pick, Ozzy Osbourne's album, The Wizard of Oz. And then we're going to move on to another record. So, I mean, it's like it just never stops here at Backtracking HQ. So, thank you for tuning in. Thanks again for Nathan Larson. Follow him on Instagram. Follow him on all of his stuff. It's all going to be in the show notes. So go check that out. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
For our first season, we selected 15 of our favorite albums that we think deserve a good old-fashioned backtracking. Backtracking is the greatest podcast. Raph and JW and Ken make this podcast every week. Backtracking is the greatest podcast. Get ready for podcast action.